You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
Hey everyone, welcome to CyberWire-X, a series of specials where we highlight important security topics affecting security professionals worldwide. I'm Rick Howard, N2K's Chief Security Officer and the CyberWire's Chief Analyst and Senior Fellow. And today, we're talking about CNAPPs, Cloud Native Application Protection Platforms. And that is a mouthful. After the break, we'll take a deep dive look about this relatively new complexity reduction tool and why you should consider deploying one. Come right back. Today at the CyberWire hash table, I'm joined by Tim Miller, the technical marketing engineer at Panoptica, Cisco's cloud application security solution, discovered and acquired by their new products and markets incubation engine called Outshift just last year, and Kevin Ford, the CISO at Esri, and a veteran hash table discussion member. I started out by asking Tim to give a high-level description of what these CNAPPs are and how they might be useful.
When we deploy our cloud-native apps in the cloud, we've got all these different layers that we have to prepare before we even, start running that application. Deploying cloud accounts, configuring them, giving the access, the network topology, if I'm using AWS terminology, VPCs have to be constructed, subnets, the whole kit and caboodle, all the way up to actually then the services that we're going to consume, building a Kubernetes cluster and such. So all of those things have settings, all those things have security concerns. And so a CNAPP platform is designed to look at every single layer that goes into building your application, including the build process. So the expression we see in Gartner all the time is code to cloud, right? So it is literally from when developers are writing the code to how you're deploying and operating and monitoring it in the cloud.
So when I first started thinking about this topic, I was thinking CNAPP is just another version of a firewall, but that's not really what it is at all, is it? It's not doing protection. Is it more just configuration management? Is that it?
That's certainly where the industry started. And I'd say up until the past year, it's been primarily focused, I'll say, on posture assessments, pulling down all those configs, doing posture assessment from 7 different ways to Sunday, as the expression goes, right? But recently, detection and response has gotten a lot of traction in this space as well. So now we're going beyond just how it's configured and daily scans using what we would call in the industry an agentless approach to actually needing to start building in agents, deploying agents and instrumenting the cloud platforms, the services, and getting telemetry from them so we can detect incidents going on.
So, Kevin, you've been a CISO of a company called ERSI. Is that how you pronounce it, ERSI?
Esri, Environmental Systems Research Institute, yeah.
Esri. It's the reason I asked, man. And you've been there for almost 3 years now, and then according to the website, you guys build geographic information system software for location intelligence and mapping, something the marketing people call the science of where, which I just love. What a great tagline that is. And you guys have been deploying these CNAPP platforms for a while. So can you give us a sense of how you guys are deployed architecturally without giving any details away, and then how these kind of platforms benefit you guys and why you like them so much?
Sure, yeah. So I think to understand this CNAPP space, you kind of have to understand where we've been a little bit historically with the cloud. If you look back a decade or more ago, we were kind of in cloud architectures that resembled more of a data center in the cloud with virtualization. But as we moved forward and started to develop and adopt cloud-native solutions, things like APIs, containerization, Docker containers, that sort of thing, we needed new types of security software to secure all of that. So, a CNAPP is kind of a collection of a lot of different capabilities associated with securing these cloud-native applications that we use to build our products, to build to build our corporate environment, those sorts of things. And so we use them largely for container security, looking at container workloads, making sure those are secure. We use them to help understand the posture of our clouds, how the network is deployed, how the various aspects of each of our cloud environments are deployed. And it's actually really helpful also to cross the bridges between our multi-cloud environments, right? So where in the past we were using potentially vendor-specific tools, for instance, the tools that AWS comes with or the tools that Azure comes with, now we can use a CNAPP platform to bring that all under one pane of glass. And that's also been very effective for us.
That's what I was going to ask, and that's the kind of marketing line for these things: is that you can use one platform and configure multiple cloud environments. But is it really that easy, Kevin? I mean, I want to configure a container in AWS. I also want to configure a container, and for security wise, in Azure, let's say. Okay, is it really just use the CNAPP and it knows how to configure those things in those environments?
Yeah, it's not exactly that easy, right? If it was, they'd be selling these like hotcakes. There are, there is some work that needs to go into integrate all of this, but we're talking about a tremendously large suite of capabilities that these things have. Where we were looking at separate tools in the past for container security, for endpoint detection and response in the cloud, for virtualized things, for entitlement management, and understanding our access model. All of this stuff can be done with CNAPP, and I would hate to say that we're using every aspect of a CNAPP, right? There are certainly things that we still do in different technologies, but more and more, I think we find ourselves moving into, the CNAPP world and trying to centrally manage it.
Tim, it feels like this is a platform that kind of bridges the gap between manual configuration that we all used to love to do and some sort of automatic CI/CD pipeline that the IT guys like to do. This platform allows us to automate some of the things that we would screw up if we had to do them over and over again manually. Am I wrong about that? Is that the right way to say that?
No, that is the right way to say it, especially on the code side of that code to cloud, right? So we need to instrument those pipelines so that these tests are automated. And so these CNAPP platforms have that capability of running security tests as part of, a pull request, a merge event, for example, or whenever, the day's over and they're just committing their code, right, before they log out at night. So all of these tests can be triggered, and there's a whole suite of these tests, from things like linting, for example, to make sure it meets certain code standards and you're doing best practice from a software editing, for lack of a better phrase, a software editing perspective, all the way through, actually identifying security problems. Some of these things embed into their integrated development environments, their IDEs, and then some of them are just in the source code management platforms where they check in the code. So it's really all about getting that automation. And then, of course, to Kevin's point, aggregating that information up into a central platform that then the security teams have the breadth of information and the developers can access it too, right? They have this breadth of information about their holistic security posture across that entire spectrum of stack, that entire stack that defines their application.
So, Kevin, let me drill down on that a bit, right? So can we use these CNAPP platforms as like an intelligence platform? Because you're connecting to all these applications in the cloud. I'm collecting telemetry, let's say, like we used to do in the old days for the hardware platforms. Can you use it like that? Is that one use case for it?
Potentially, I think still probably you're going to be looking, if you're looking at, for instance, threat intelligence, you're still probably going to be looking at piping that into a SIM. Now, some of the CNAPP platforms may have kind of a native SIM-like experience, but if you're, a larger organization and you value the business, logs and the intelligence from around the business, you're still probably going to be using a central SIM to evaluate things like workload protection. there is some meaningful data to be gleaned here around, uptime and how my cloud load is looking and that sort of thing.
It's not a souped up XDR platform. That's not what this is. So it's not that. We're not connecting APIs and things. What's the difference between what a CNAPP platform is and an XDR platform?
Well, I think the important point, and to key off what Kevin said, it's the CNAPP platform is really focused on cloud-based applications, cloud-native applications. So an organization isn't, there are some, don't get me wrong, but most organizations aren't going to be only in the cloud. They're going to have resources outside of that really a CNAPP today, who knows where these things are going because they're evolving very quickly. But today, CNAPP's not going to cover everything. SIM is a great example of that, right? There's a whole lot of telemetry from other parts of the business that need to go into the SIM perspective and get the rich intelligence a SIM can provide, right? CNAPPs certainly feed into that, but they're not going to be your end-all be-all CNAPP destination. Primarily because there's also a crap ton of data in there, right? So that's most of these CNAPPs are SaaS-based offerings, and you're going to struggle to find most of the CNAPP vendors hosting that much data. In fact, I'd like to say most of us try and shy away from storing as much customer-specific data in the cloud, because then we become the targets of attack vectors, right? We become an attack vector for your environment. So we like, from a CNAPP perspective, to come in, do whatever intelligence in your cloud environment, right? So when we're doing container scans, for example, we're going to do those container assessments in your environment. So any private access to the registry is stays local. Any sensitive information that might be on that container that we discover, we're going to flag as being there, but we're not necessarily going to export the raw data and then potentially compromise your account. So all that to say, it's a piece of the puzzle. XDR is certainly something that CNAPP platforms can export to or be a part of as well. I know my particular one does. With the ones that the XDR and SecureX here at Cisco, we're integrating with those kind of platforms, and others could too.
So, Tim, one clarification point, a crap ton of data, is that the technical term we're using for that?
It's slightly larger amount than a truckload versus, a station wagon full of tapes, show my age here. Yeah.
Kevin, though, I mentioned firewalls at the beginning of this. It feels like when all the firewall vendors went to the cloud and built software firewalls like Cisco and Checkpoint and Palo Alto Networks and Fortinet and all those guys, it feels like this is something those platforms would eventually do. Is the software firewall merging with a CNAPP platform, or are we going to keep these two things separate?
Yeah, I don't know that I see the firewall itself merging with the CNAPP platform or things like CASB, but it is kind of in that same realm of your complete breakfast as far as it's concerned as your cloud security. You're going to want to have those things as well. This is more if you focus at the application stack, trying to push identifying vulnerabilities or even malware or hidden secrets in your code, in your dependencies, and making sure it doesn't make its way up into the cloud, and then also monitoring the workloads while they're in the cloud, right? And so one of the things you said that actually kind of resonated to me, Tim, is that, this can potentially be seen as maybe part of a complete XDR solution, right? Particularly when we get into the area of workload protection, workload analysis, that sort of thing, where we're not just looking for configuration issues, but we're actually starting to get into the abilities of, looking at system calls and scrutinizing those. So it's not just about misconfigurations anymore. We can also start to look at, what our workloads are doing in either serverless or container environments, and that's very important. And that gives us kind of the same lens that we get from more traditional XDR technologies, like EDRs that feed into XDR.
These things are Swiss Army knives of capability. They can do lots of things, My personal favorite of this is just the reduction of complexity, especially if you're in a multi-cloud environment. That's what would appeal to me if I was considering buying one of these tools. But what's your favorite thing that CNAPP does that you think is very valuable?
Certainly bringing everything into one, I hate to say it, single pane of glass, right? Yeah. Bringing all of this information together is certainly key. But honestly, if you don't do it right, if you're not doing more than that, right? I can have 12 different risk engines, generating alerts from, detection and response to workload protection to vulnerabilities from the pipeline. I could have pages and pages of red. So the goal of a CNAPP is not only just to bring it together, but to bring context to it. So the real promise and the real value is when you're prioritizing these risks, looking at them in their context so that you can identify those things that you need to remediate first, because every one of those risk engines is going to give you a prioritized list from its myopic perspective, right? So CVEs, they have CVS scores, right? And, they're all well, I won't say they are all, but most of them are 9.8. How do I tell these 100 9.8s from those 100 9.8s, right? And there's products out there that help you to do that from just a vulnerability perspective and some telemetry from the internet. But, if that workload's not public, if it's behind, if it's private access and you've done a whole lot of mitigating controls to make sure nobody can get to it, do I need to make that my first priority, or is the public facing one the one I need to mitigate, right? So the real value that CNAPPs bring, especially when you're dealing with attack path analysis, is to look at those in their context and prioritize your risks. And that's really where CNAPPs shine. If they do that attack path analysis right and prioritize it well, then that's gold for a SecOps engineer.
So double down on that for me, Tim, because you and I talked about that in the pre-work before we started recording. Explain to me what attack path analysis is in the context of a CNAPP. What does that mean?
Sure. To continue that thought of these risk engines, right? I've got all these different things that will do a posture assessment, look at misconfigurations and things like that. The detection and response will give me alerts. From API security, I'm looking at the traffic, looking at the traces that are generated by those REST API calls and getting sensitive data detection and things like that. All these alerts are parts of your application. And really what attack path analysis is about is putting the MITRE ATT&CK framework to work, right? We know this, there's all these techniques and tactics, right? And so how do I move laterally through an environment? I have, as the owner of that environment, I see it all, right? And so can I use this tool? Can I use this CNAPP to look at these misconfigurations and look at the various vulnerabilities and stitch together a path through my environment from public access to, crypto mining?
A CNAPP can find open pathways across the intrusion kill chain that you may not know that you had.
Exactly.
We know what Panda Bear's attack path is because of the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Does it tell us that you're open to Panda Bear, or are we still waiting for that to happen in a CNAPP environment?
So you can write specific queries to look for that particular attack.
You have to do that yourself at this point. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So you either do it or, the community has written it for, there's popular CNAPPs out there. So there's a body of work that enthusiasts have put out there. Or if your attack path analysis is algorithmic, and you give it kind of the basic framework for that attack, it can find that plus variations of it. So you can do very specific queries and look for that specific thing. And if you've got it, then you'll find it. But if there's variations to that attack that develop, you're going to miss those until you write those specific queries. And that's where attack path analysis that use algorithmic or generic query approaches, that's where they'll shine, in that they'll not only find what you're specifically looking for, but they know how to be generic enough from an algorithm perspective to find those things or find variations of it and find things you're not looking for.
So, Kevin, do you think there's a world in the future where the vendors will they'll suck in the attack path from, say, Panda Bear and say, hey, you're wide open to this, as opposed to them customers having to figure out themselves, because that's what I would want as a CISO. I want them to, they got the intelligence teams. They should be able to tell me that, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I think that's where it's going. That's where I hope it's going. That kind of high level context is really important for a security manager or a CISO. Um, it's the MITRE attack framework, and there's one for cloud as well. Is a very very powerful tool at understanding the stepping stones to getting hacked and making sure that when we talk about shifting left, we're cutting off the ability of an attack as close to the entry point as possible. So, a CNAPP can do a lot of things that can help us understand and identify the steps along the attack path. Things like understanding specific vulnerabilities that a particular threat vector would use. Understanding, I talked a little bit about the infrastructure and posture. So understanding the posture and infrastructure of my underlying cloud account, how things are engineered, not just within the workloads, but all the supporting infrastructure, and things also like entitlement management, understanding who can get to what from where, right? That can really help you understand what the potential for lateral movement is as well. So there are a lot of handy tools in there that can help with that cloud attack framework and evaluating that. I would love to see a company put together a attack map, something that's more of a stepping stone chart that I could, bring the CEO in or CIO and point and say, hey, this is where we have an issue. So the attacker can walk across this path and this path, but we've blocked this path and they can't go anywhere. That's always been my dream, to be able to just kind of show that. But so I think there are a lot of tools in CNAPP that can help us illustrate that. But I'd love to actually see a company put one of those together as a visual. It would be pretty cool.
The last time I checked the MITRE attack framework, there was about 150 active campaigns that they're tracking, mostly nation state. They don't really track criminal groups that well. But if you talk to Microsoft or you talk to anybody else really, like the FBI, they think there's about 100 active cybercrime groups. So if we could have built into the CNAPP all those attack paths and let it tell us that, hey, you guys are open to 25 of these attacks, that would be very useful, I think. Right. So that's my dream too, Kevin. That's what I'd love to see. Tim, since ChatGPT first came out at the end of 2022, we broadcast out of the state of Maryland. And by Maryland state law, we're not allowed to even record a podcast unless we talk about the implications of large language models, machine learning, and the future of AI. So where do you see all that fitting in to the CNAPP platform?
Well, the first easy step, I think, is because there's so much capability in there, so many of those risk engines that feed data in, custom reporting is hard to do, right? Some vendors are doing fairly well at it, some not so much. But I think that is probably the easiest benefit, and we see that already coming out. We're gonna announce something here soon. Our competitors have as well. So the ability to basically have an AI bot to help me navigate the platform, right? Doing simple things like show me, the 5 latest, vulnerabilities that showed up in my environment overnight. So that nice AI bot type of chat ops approach to your platform, except backed by natural language processing, right? The whole benefit of, conversational interactions with my CNAPP platform.
Yeah, not a Terminator sentient being, but the large language models will help us navigate the CNAPP platform with more efficiently. Is that what you're saying?
More humorously call it the C3PO of AI, right? So it'll be this nice little bot to help you navigate all the different aspects of your platform.
Kevin, what's your take on this? You have to weigh in on the AI discussion. So what do you think?
Yeah, it seems like I'm always talking about AI these days. Within security tools, not just within CNAPPs, we're starting to see the emergence of AI bots, and exactly the way Tim described it is they're kind of helpers for a particular suite of tools, and so I would say of mixed effectiveness. It depends on what your organizational security workflow is. If you have analysts working directly in those tool sets, it can be very helpful. But if you're a large organization or an organization that generally relies on SIM tools, you have multiple of those sorts of suites of tools, right? And so that becomes kind of less helpful. That doesn't mean it's not a value add for the product. You can, if you see something in a SIM tool and decide to go under the hood with any one of these, particular security tools, you can use that AI to help an analyst too. It's generally someone who, sits in the SIM tool level, understand what they're looking for in that deeper security tool level. So it just really depends on your workflow and, like I said, how you interact with the security tools.
So, guys, we're getting to the end of this. If you could give the audience one takeaway about why they should be using a CNAPP platform, let's say, what would it be?
I would say the easiest takeaway here is that there's far too much complexity in deploying just a single web service to a cloud. I mean, just you're dealing with at the bare minimum a dozen different services you have to configure, and that's the most basic application you can deploy. And quite frequently we see hundreds. Just when I deploy a Kubernetes cluster, my list has 35 different services that go into deploying a Kubernetes service. It's extremely complex. It's too much for a single human or a team of humans to keep in mind all the different ways that I can move laterally through that system. So you have to have it. It's table stakes for operating applications in the cloud.
So it does a lot of things, but probably the number one, according to you, Tim, is its complexity reducer. I'll just give that the Twitter line, all right? How about you, Kevin?
Man, I'm just going to jump on what Tim said to begin with. Yeah, reducing complexity, that's huge for us. Being able to use a tool to essentially manage all this is a really big step in the right direction. I'll also say that, before CNAPP was coined as a term, a lot of these functionalities existed. They're just kind of getting packaged into this larger CNAPP suite. So if you're someone who's cost conscious, which I think all of us are, bundle and save. Get yourself exactly a CNAPP. Right. Don't buy all these things individually. So
we're seeing that consolidation happening. All the vendors are acquiring different startups to build out that portfolio because data security is a big one where we're seeing acquisitions happen in 2023. So yeah, it's a growing space, and you're just going to see that functionality continue to consolidate in a CNAPP platform.
I used to be one of those guys, that I'd always want the very best tool, the shiny object. Let me have 1,000 of those things, right? But as I've gotten older, I don't have the energy to manage that. So give me something easy. It may not be the best tool, but at least it gets the job done. And like you said, the complexity is a lot lower, right? So I appreciate that. Well, I have learned a lot about CNAPPs, more than I did before we started this program. So I appreciate you guys coming on and helping this. But before I let you go, I always like to give the audience, point them in the direction of good content. Anything interesting you've been reading, Tim, that you want to point people to?
I've been catching up on all the state of affairs for 2023.
Because it's the end of the year and new year. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And so the GitLab State of DevSecOps was a very interesting read, specifically about, the AI, how AI is helping software development. There's a lot of interesting insights in there.
Perfect. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, if you're a federal contractor, you should be aware of the new CMMC proposed rule is out. So if you want to dig through hundreds of pages of legalese, do that. But we talked a lot about the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and I'm a big fan of that, as you could probably tell. And so something I've been digging through recently is the MITRE ATT&CK evaluations around different security tools. It's a pretty nice site they put together, and then you can actually go and find some real neat third-party dashboards also. So something probably every CISO should be aware of.
I've been reading Andy Greenberg's Tracers in the Dark book, probably the best cybercrime book I've read in the last decade. And it pretty much blows away any idea that we had that crypto stuff was anonymous. The good guys know how to break all that. I'll just say that. And it's a fabulous story, so everybody should go out and read Tracers in the Dark. Well, boys, we did a good job here. Thanks for coming on the show, and then we'll talk to you all later. We'd like to thank Tim Miller, the technical marketing engineer at Panoptica, Cisco's cloud application security solution, and Kevin Ford, the CISO at Esri, for helping us get our arms around this relatively new security tool that might help you reduce the complexity within your security stack. And we'd like to thank Panoptica for sponsoring the show. Finally, to learn more about cloud-native application protection platforms, consider attending the Cisco Live EMEA conference in Amsterdam in just a few weeks, February 5 through 8. The conference URL is in the show notes. This has been a production of the CyberWire and N2K, and we feel privileged that podcasts like CyberWire-X are part of the daily intelligence routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, as well as the critical security teams supporting the Fortune 500 and many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K Strategic Workforce Intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. Learn more at n2k.com. Our senior producer is Jennifer Eiben. Our sound engineer is Trey Hester, and I'm Rick Howard. Thanks for listening.